My topic for the presentation is contemporary issues in marriage, family, and kinship. Introduction. It has been generally assumed that the institution of marriage is a universal feature in human societies, although many sociologists and anthropologists have attempted to provide definitions of marriage. None of them has been satisfactory and sufficiently general enough to encompass all its various manifestations in different cultures. It is a biological fact that marriage and receive drawn to purpose definitions of marriage centering on the principle of legitimacy. According to Malinowski, a legal marriage is one which gives a woman a socially recognized husband and her children a socially recognized father. It is clear from different that it is only through the establishment of culturally controlled and sanctioned marital relations that a family comes into being. The institutionalized from these relations is called marriage, and family are two aspects of the same social reality that is recognized by the world. Anderson and Parker say that wedding is the recognition usually accompanying it. Such a ceremony indicates the society's control. Anthropological studies of marriage have brought out complex marriage systems. In the New York host marriage, a woman marries a woman. In another form of marriage, a widow either remarries or takes love. The children born to her are considered as a legitimate offspring of her dead husband. In yet another form of marriage, among the newer, a woman marries another senior woman. Children born to their junior woman because of the links with the lover are considered to be the members of the husband's patronage in the maternal Naya society in Kerala. Young girls were married ceremoniously but did not reside with their husbands. Choice and regulation in marriage. Marriage, a legally and social sanctioned union, usually between a man and a woman, that is regulated by laws, rules, customs, beliefs, and attitudes that prescribe the rights and duties of the partners and accords status to the offspring. The universality of marriage within different societies and cultures is attributed to the many basic social and personal functions for which it provides structure, such as sexual gratification and regulation, division of labor between the sexes, economic status, and companionship. Perhaps its strongest function concerns procreation, the care of children and their education and socialization, and regulation of lines of descent. Through the ages, marriage have been taken a great number of forms. By the 21st century, the nature of marriage in Western countries, particularly with regard to the significance of procreation and the ease of divorce, had begun to change. In 2000, the Netherlands became the first country to legalize same-sex marriages. The law went into force of April 1st, 2001. In the ensuing years, numerous other countries, including Canada 2005, France 2013, the United States 2015, and Germany 2017, followed suit. In addition, some countries extended benefits of obligation to same-sex couples by means of a registered partnership or civil union, both of which terms meant different things in different contexts. In the biological evolutionary scale, the more complex the species, the longer the offspring is dependent on its mother of survival from the time to birth to maturity. Human beings at the top of the evolutionary scale requires the most time of all species to reach maturity. The imposes increased duties on human parents for the care of their children. And marriage traditionally has been seen as the institution best suited to fulfill these parental duties and responsibilities. Martial customs and laws. Some form of marriage has been found to exist in all human societies, past and present. Its importance can be seen in the elaborate and complex laws and rituals surrounding it. Although these laws and rituals are as varied and numerous as human social and cultural, some universals to apply. The main legal function to each other is to ensure the rights of the partnerships of children with the community. Marriage has historically conferred a legitimate status on the offspring, when entitled him or her to the various privileges set down by the traditions of that community, including the right of inheritance. In most societies, marriage also established the permissible social relations allowed to the offspring, including the acceptable selection of father spouse. Until the late 20th century, marriage was really a matter of free choice. In Western societies, love between spouses came to be associated with marriage, but even in Western cultures, as the novels of writers such as Henry James and Edith Wharton attest, romantic love was not the primary motive for matrimony in most eras, and one's marriage partner was carefully chosen. Endogamy, the practice of marrying someone who which one's own tribe or group, is the oldest social regulation of marriage. When the forms of communication with outside groups are limited, endogamous marriage is a consequence. Cultural pressure to marry with one social and ethnic group are still very strongly enforced in some societies. Exogamy, the practice of marrying outside the group, is found in societies in which kinship relations are the most complex, thus barring from marriage large groups who may trace their to the common ancestor. In societies in which the large or extended family remains the basic unit, marriages are usually arranged by the family. The assumption is that love between the partners comes after marriage, and much thought is given to the socio-economic advantages accruing to their larger family from the match. By contrast, in societies in which the small or nuclear family predominates, young adults usually choose their own mates. It is assumed that love precedes nine and determines marriage, and less thought is normally given to the socio-economic aspects of the match. In societies with the arranged marriages, the almost universal custom is that someone acts as an intermediary or matchmaker. The person's chief responsibility is to arrange a marriage that will be satisfactory to the two families represented. Some form of dowry or bride wealth is almost always exchanged in societies that favor arranged marriage. In societies in which individuals choose their own mates, dating is the most typical way for people to meet and become acquainted with prospective partners. Successful dating may result in courtship, which then usually lead to marriage. Marriage rituals. The rituals and ceremonies surrounding marriage in most cultures are associated primarily with Christianity and validate the importance of marriage for the continuation of a clan, people, or society. They also assert of familial or communal sanction of the mutual choice and an understanding of the difficulties and sacrifices involved in making what is considered in most cases to be lifelong committed and responsibility for the welfare of spouse and children. Marriage ceremonies include symbolic rites often sanctified by religious order, which are thought to confer good fortune on the couple. Because economic considerations play an essential role in the success of child rearing, the offering of gifts, both real and symbolic, to the married couple are a significant part of the marriage ritual. Where the exchange of goods is extensive, either form of bride choice, one's martial partner has been limited and determined by the families of the brotherhood. Fertility rites intended to ensure a fruitful marriage exist in some form in all ceremonies. Some of the oldest rituals of cereal gain that may be sprinkled over the couple or on the nuptial bed, the accompaniment of a small child with the bride, and the breaking of an object of food to ensure a successful consumption of the marriage and an easy childbirth. The most universal rituals is one that symbolizes a sacred union. This may be expressed by the joining of hands, an exchange of rings or chain, or the typing of garments. However, all the elements in marriage rituals vary greatly among different societies, and components such as time, place, and the social importance of the event are fixed by tradition and habit. These traditions are to a certain extent shaped by the religious beliefs and practices found in societies throughout the world. In the Hindu tradition, for example, Weddings are highly elaborate affairs involving several prescribed rituals. Marriages are generally arranged by the parents of the couple, and the date of the ceremony is determined by careful astrological calculations. Among most Buddhists, marriage remains primarily a secular affair, even though the Buddha offered guidelines for the responsibilities of lay householders. In in Buddhism, marriage is believed to have to have been instituted by God and is described as making the individual complete. Marriage involves a double ceremony which includes the formal betrothal and wedding rites. Prior to the 12th century, the two were separated by as much as 1 year. The modern ceremony begins with the groom signing the marriage contract before a group of witnesses. He is then led to the bride's room, where he places a vial on her. This is followed by the ceremony under the huppah, a canopy that symbolizes the bridal bower, which involves the reading of the marriage contract. The seven marriage benedictions, the grooms placing a ring on the bride's finger. In conservation and reform traditions, the double ring ceremony foot. After the marriage, after the ceremony, the couple is led into a private room for seclusion, which symbolizes the consumption of the marriage. From its beginning, Christianity has emphasized the spiritual nature and indissolubility of marriage. Jesus Christ spoke of marriage as instituted by God, and most Christians it a permanent union based upon mutual consent. Some Christian churches quote marriage as one of the sacraments. Other Christians confirm the sanctity of marriage but do not identify it as a sac- sacrament. Since the Middle Ages, Christian weddings have taken place before a priest or minister, and his ceremony involves the exchange of vows regarding from scripture, blessings, and sometimes the Eucharistic rite. Eucharistic rite. In Islam, marriage is not strictly as sacrament but is always understood as a gift from God. The basic Islam tenets concerning marriage are laid out the Quran, which states that the marital blind race on Muslim men may have up to four wives at one time, though they seldom do. But the wives must all be treated equally. Marriages are traditionally contracted by the father or guardian of the bride and her intended husband, who must offer his bride the mahar, a payment offered as a gift to guarantee her financial independence. Exchange marriage. Exchange marriage from the marriage involving an arranged and reciprocal exchange of spouse between two groups. Exchange marriage is most common in societies that have a unilateral descent system emphasizing the male line and a consistent expectation of post-martial residence with or near the groom's family. In such case, the symmetry of an alliance is often maintained by a systematic exchange. Whenever a marriage is arranged between a daughter from Group A and son from Group B, a marriage between a daughter from Group B and the son of Group A is also arranged. Often, as among some Australian Aborigines and American subrastic people, a traditional ideal was for a brother and sister from one family to marry a sister and brother, respectively from another. When these processes are repeated by subsequent generations, the practice is known as cross-cousin marriage. As power and discrimination in the family. As men take on more family responsibilities over time, with women still shouldering considerably more childcare and housework, an important ethical matter facing organizations is that of providing a supportive environment to foster employee well-being and balance between work and family. Using conservation of resources theory, these multi-source study examinations and the associations between perceived family responsibility, discrimination, and work-life conflict as mediated by emotional exhaustion. Employee gender and power distance values are tested as moderates of the perceived family responsibility discrimination to emotional exhaustion relationship. Results suggest that male employees who pursue family responsibility, discrimination from their supervisor, and hold high power distance value experience increased emotional exhaustion and work-life conflict. Female workers who pursue family responsibility, discrimination from their supervisor experience increased emotional exhaustion and work-life conflict regardless of whether they have high or low power distance. Findings are consistent with theory-based predictions from conservation of resources theory. Resources that are valued and not provided in the work context deplete emotional energies and ultimately trigger work-life conflict. Findings build on the work-life literature by introducing gender and power distance as factors that shape when employees feel the draining effects of family responsibilities discrimination. New reproductive technologies. In a predominant fertile world, it is expected that pregnancy will occur when men and women decide to become parents, and it is surprising when this does not happen. For most men and women, infertility is a disruption of the family project and a social situation that differs from the majority. Involuntary childlessness is considered a major life issue associated with physiological suffering and long-term consequences. Women who desire a child and cannot achieve pregnancy perceive themselves as different from women who are fertile and feel they are losing something important in their lives. The diagnosis of infertility may become a life crisis, and most couples need to develop mechanisms to cope with the temporary or permanent loss of fertility and the develop mechanism to cope with the temporary permanent loss of fertility and the possibility to having a biological child. After diagnosis, men and women have feelings of loss of control over their life project and feel they are unable to achieve their life expectations. Infertile couples may have difficulty communicating their feelings to family and friends with children because they do not perceive a comprehensive social environment to understand their situation. Frequently, they feel alone and without support to deal with the experience of infertility and the need for sharing experience with other infertile couples. Guidance through the treatment process and written information about practical and emotional aspects of treatment to help them through the experience and infertility. Over the last decades, may women have established stable relationships after achieving other life goals such as a career and financial stability, postponing the desire to have children. The mean age of women at the time of their first pregnancy has increased in recent years, and in the last decade was 28 to 29 years old in most of Western Hemisphere countries. In this scenario, many try to become pregnant with their first child when fertility starts to decline and the risk of infertility is higher. The consequences of infertility and how it affects the lives of women in poor resource settings, particularly in developing countries, has become an important issue to be discussed in reproductive health. In some societies, the inability of fulfill the desire to have children, together with the social stigma associated with infertility, makes it difficult for the infertile couple. In many regions, infertility is considered a tragedy that affects not only the infertile couple of women but the entire family. Many societies still view infertility as affecting only the woman, and those who are children are frequently neglected or exposed to humiliation and domestic violence. Furthermore, the situation and their own suffering because of the impossibility of conceiving a child may lead to diverse physiological problems such as distress, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, feelings of blame and guilt, and reduced sexual interest. Seeking for solutions when there are no services available in the public sector or at an affordable cost, women may include women may be induced to seek ineffective therapies, consequently access to the diagnosis and treatment infertility, including assisted reproductive technologies (ART), contributes to resolving social inequities and emotional difficulties. Infertility is more than a health problem; it is a social issue and a public health matter. More than 30 years have elapsed since the first publication reported birth of a child. such produce is lacking in developing countries. Even in developed countries, low-income couples have great difficulties of access due to the high cost charged by private clinics and the lack of services offered by the public sector. Infertility. This is a position paper which encompasses a review of the needs of low-income infertile couples, mainly those living in developing countries, regarding access to infertility care, including art and initiatives to provide art at low or affordable cost. Information was gathered from the database Medline, Central Popline, Embase, LILACS, and ICTRP with the keywords infertility, low income assisted reproductive technologies, affordable cost, and low cost. Infertility medical cause. Approximately one third cases are due to the male factor. One Approximately one third case are due to the male factor, one third to the female factor, and the remaining third of combination of male and female factors, or to unidentified causes in settings with poor access to health service. Common cause of infertility are postpartum and post-abortion infections, tuberculosis, and sexual transmitted infections (STIs). Infertility can also be a consequence of infection after male genetical circumstances. In some developing countries, cohabitation is a common practice and adolescent pregnancy rates are high. This early age of sexual debut may be related a high prevalence of reproductive tract infection (RTI) and the infertility which may consequently occur is high in developing countries, and the best way to reduce this incidence is through prevention and RH education. An important task for governments, however, this represents a challenge because education is a long-term process and individuals who are infertile because they do not use means of prevention need to be treated. It is well known that tubal obstruction. Marriage migration. Marriage migration is a major form of migration in China. It is also highly gender specific. The great majority of marriage migrants are women. A woman normally moves to her husband's village on marriage and transfers her household registration. Very rarely the man moves to join his bride. In either case, if the move is across administrative boundaries, it will show up in both the household registers and in the census as a migration like any other. In general, the study of migration tends to focus heavily on economic migration. Indeed, marriage migration is often omitted altogether from the literature on migration. It seems appropriate to discuss if there in some detail of several reasons. First, as we have seen in chapter 2, as migration is defined as mobility across administrative boundaries. Marriage migration is included in much macro data of migration in China. The importance of marriage in female migration makes it essential to the study of women's migration and of gender differences in migration. Finally, there is considerable evidence that a new marriage market has developed since the economic reforms functioning over long distance. This development in some ways parallels the development of labor migration in recent years.